Alright, YouTube, back here with another YouTube video today, and before I get into the video, I would like if you all would like, comment, and subscribe. That'd be pretty awesome. And also, before I get into it, I'm doing something a little bit different. I played this league without recording, and I'm gonna do a little post-game analysis on all my matches. Just let me know if you like it or not. I'm just kind of curious. Not a permanent thing, but if you guys would ever like to see it, allows me to focus, even though I did have a lot of misclicks and just like kind of airheaded mistakes in this, but um, that was a very interesting league and just thought you guys would enjoy to watch it. But just let me know. And onto the deck. It's pretty much just Grixis Shadow again. We're playing with Dress Down still. I'm not sure if Dress Down's necessarily the best card anymore. It definitely had some applications in these games, but I think you could end up cutting it. Like out of all the weaknesses of the deck, I think Dress Down's the weakest link, and I think it'd be better off as a sideboard card. I still don't even know if you want it. It definitely does do some things, and it won us a few matches, but I'm not certain if it's necessarily where you want to be anymore. I think Grixis Shadow's in a great spot. You could replace them with Scourges, you could replace them with spells, you could find something, I'm not even sure. Like maybe a K command, something like that. I do think K command would be pretty good in this deck, although it's not in here. Maybe we need to add some more lands, maybe cut like a Dress Down for the 19th land and 2 K commands. I think that would be perfectly fine, but I don't know. The deck felt really good, and I'm prepared, and like the sideboard felt really good. Other than I think all of the sideboard slots came in at one point. The weakest cards, though, to me are Unearth and Dress Down. I think I would add another Soul Guide Lantern and maybe a Fluster Storm, something like that. But the rest of the sideboard looks really clean. Alpine Moon, Unholy Heat, Terminates. I really like all of those slots. But we're about to get into the first match, so I hope you all enjoy. All right, we're getting into the first match and game of the league, and we won the die roll, and we are looking at our first hand. This was our original hand. Hand needs a lot of help, so we ended up mulliganing. DRC, if this was Ragavan, I'd keep, but DRC, there's no chance. Like, if we don't draw land, we're just like, what are we even doing with this hand? It doesn't really do much. It doesn't accomplish anything. This could be a quick Dress Down Croxa hand, but like, we just need too much help, so I ended up just like completely, like, this hand's just bad. So, second hand, definitely much better. We get to lead off on Ragavan here, which is like the best turn 1 play. You could Inquisition, but I think Ragavan's just too high of an upside. So, lead off on Ragavan, say go. We see a Wooded Foothills, which is kind of interesting, but again, not a common fetch land to lead off on. So we decided to just swing in, see what happens. And we hit a Lightning Helix here. And that's definitely something interesting. I thought about potentially casting it, but Inquisitioning first is definitely correct. You want to get some information whether or not this is burn, because Wooded Foothills at a burn is something not completely unreasonable. So thought we'd fire off the Inquisition. It ended up not being burn at all. It is a transmogrified deck slash expressive or not expressive, Indomitable Creativity. So their hand was a pretty easy take of Rin. There's nothing else in there that's particularly reasonable to take. Like, they have 2 Helixes. If they had only one, we had Thoughtseize it away, but we can't do that. So we just pass the turn here. Just pretty simple. And yeah, I mean, they just play land go. They shock in the Steam Winds, which is kind of interesting instead of Plains. They could have played the Plains and still had Lightning Helix up. So I thought that was a little interesting, but I think it makes sense. That like definitely signals that they do play Dwarven Mine, so that's something to keep in mind. Like, why else would you do that? I mean, this was a pretty clean turn as well. We just attack with Ragavan, they Lightning Helix, which is fine. Then we just go Thoughtseize Shadow. Pretty, scripted turns here. Their hand's not very good. It's just Emrakul and lands at this point, so they found a Chalice, which was super annoying this game. And we top deck an Expressive Iteration, and so we definitely made a mistake. I went a little fast there, but the Expressive Iteration had Shadow, Drown the Lock, and Bolt. Definitely should have taken the Drown the Lock. I just that was just a misclick, and it's one of those things that's just super annoying, and I just didn't even think about it. I was like, okay, let's just click, like, whatever. I was thinking not ahead of time, so that just, like, completely passed my mind at the time, and, like, I think it was literally just a misclick, and I just made a mistake there. So it happens, but having a drown here would be very good, but, you know, you can't fix the past. So we draw a land. I think this is a pretty easy Croxa turn. You could buy Lurrus, but like Lurrus doesn't do anything, so I decide to go with Croxa here. There's no real reason. Play land second just because you want to give them less information. And we're not attacking with Shadow here because of the fear of Dwarven Mine. So that was just like the small thing here. Just not attacking with Shadow seems correct. So they're holding their fetch land, which totally is like firing off Dwarven Mine to me. Plus the fact that they had Emrakul, like that just makes 100%, like just makes perfect sense. We draw a Bauble, which is kind of nice, but we're gonna slam this Croxa down, and we're gonna save Bauble in the bin just for Lurrus. So when we Mishra's Bauble them here, we see something a little interesting, which is a Nahiri the Harbinger. So I decided at this moment that I'm going to attack with my Shadow. I'm fine with them losing a land to kill my Shadow, and the fact that we get to shuffle away their Nahiri was a good enough reason to do that to me. Not sure if this was correct, but I don't know how we're beating Nahiri. So I decided to make this play. We lose our Shadow, which, like, I could see not doing it, but, like, I made the choice there that I was going to do that because I don't think we could have beaten Nahiri. They find Expressive, which then exiles another Expressive, so they kind of get to combo off here into a Chalice. So we're definitely behind here, and we draw another 1-drop. Croxa, we're, like, hoping against all, like, God, that this Croxa wins us the game, but we're not very, like, enthusiastic about it. Yeah, we just buy Lurrus, say go, and, like, this is where not having the Drown Lock definitely cost us the game. So we lose to Transmogrify, getting Emrakul, and we just can't win at this point. So, yeah, we're getting into game number 3, but, or game number 2, but, yeah, definitely a pun on my part just by misclicking. So I will see you all in game number 2. All right, before I get into game number 2, I just wanted to talk about how I sideboarded real quick. I took out all of the dress downs, the lightning bolts and unholy heats, not all of them. I kept in 2 unholy heats and 2 bolts. I think that might have been a little crazy, but we brought in the Flusterstorms and EEs. I think those are the only reasonable cards here. EE is just like quite insane against them, and Flusterstorm can at least interact with their Transmogrify or Indomitable Creativity. So those are the only real cards I thought about. Like, I guess you could like think about Soulguide Lanterns to stop Ren, but that's a losing game to me. So, but anyways, we're getting into match number 2 here, and we're looking at a very interesting hand, and it's definitely a fine hand, but I do make a mistake here, and it's very subtle at first, but very obvious when you think about it. I let off with the Steam Vents, so this is wrong for like multiple reasons. A, you can't cast a Thoughtseize or Inquisition next turn. You can't cast both, is really what I'm saying. So if we went Fetch Shock for Blood Crypt, we could have been able to cast both of them. But secondly, if we draw a Shadow specifically next turn, we can't play it either. And that is another mistake. If we go Fetch Shock, we could go Thoughtseize Shadow. So I made 2 big missteps here, although you'll see what ends up happening here. We get a little bit fortunate. So we just bobble here, put a land at the bottom. We obviously don't need it. They have a Prismari Command, nothing too good. So we end up drawing Inquisition, which is like, damn, we're really screwed now. But then we end up drawing another DRC. So at least we get a little, less punished for it. We get to play our DRC, Fetch Shock here, and then Inquisition. So we definitely have an interesting play here. I just want to talk about this decision here. So their hand is Ren, 2 removal spells, and a Prismari Command. So no real reason to take the Renin 6, considering that this Thoughtseize will give us Delirium. So the Renin 6s cannot kill either of our DRCs. So when I'm looking at this hand, I'm thinking, how do we win this game? Because like this hand's pretty good, right? I decided that the way we're winning this is by getting our DRCs through, and we're going to be an aggressive burn deck, pretty much. So then you got to ask yourself, what's the best card at that point? Then it's Lightning Helix. So I take Lightning Helix here. I think it's the best decision here because it's the card that counteracts our game plan at this point the most. And Purge is like, whatever. Like, if they were going to Purge next turn, I don't really care. Like, we can just end up taking both of their Rins and their hand does nothing. So, but I'm a little bit more afraid of them going, like, Renin 6, or, like, going Lightning Helix, then Renin 6 tick up. Like, that could be a, like, slightly problematic approach, but, like, that's fine. So I'd end up taking the Lightning Helix here. And we're just going to try and kill them before these Renin 6s matter. So they just player their Ren, buy back a Bloodstained Mire, and then we draw Drown the Lock. So now we have our next decision, which is the Surveil. EE bad, DRC bad. I think you could consider this EE though, but at the time I was not very like, I kind of wanted lightning bolts and stuff to kill them in 2 turns. So we see their hand, and oops, that happened a little fast. It was Purge Ren, Bloodstained Mire, Teferi, Prismatic Command. And I think it's another, like, with our plan, we're trying to kill them fast. So we take Purge, because it's just an answer. I think that's the only reasonable take. Like, you might want to take Teferi, but again, I'm taking Purge. I think that's the best card in their hand. And then we're going to attack them, not kill Ren, because we don't care about Ren. And then we are going to, so someone could be like, oh, maybe you want to hold up Drown Lock here, because they could go Prismatic Command down tick with onto a DRC and kill it. But they only have 2 cards in the graveyard, so we actually couldn't do that if they played it smartly. They could like fetch for a basic mountain kit, tick up Ren, or I guess they can't because they'd have to down tick Ren. But they could like tick up, get back to Teferi, and then bounce with Teferi. So something that we were scared of was just kind of like Teferi specifically, not Prismatic Command. But yeah, we just didn't want them resolving this Teferi. I think that's the only card that mattered. So we take the play of taking this Prismatic Command. We keep it an Expressive on top because that's the best card in our deck at this point. So their hand is just Prismatic Commands, and they just concede. They express iteration, don't find any action. So we're on to game 3. All right, we're getting into game number 3, and we're looking at a very, very shitty hand here. Like, multiple reasons this hand sucks. Like, first of all, the swamp just looks so awkward. And, like, I don't even feel like I need to talk about this hand. So we mulligan. We mulligan here. Second hand, yes, it's a good hand. 2 things I like about this hand. 1, discard spell. 2, quick, fast hand. We have 2 DRCs. Hopefully, I mean, they're going to be turned on by turn 2 at the bare minimum, if not turn 1. So I definitely want to keep it. Now, what's the worst card? I think it's just Shadow. Like, we're not turning on the Shadow in any meaningful way. So we kind of just have to take the Shadow and put it to the bottom and just, like, hope that we don't get screwed somehow. So we put back the Shadow, and we have a pretty easy turn 1, right? Draw, of course, Shadow, the card we don't care about. So we're just going to fetch Shock, play this DRC, and then we have some interesting surveils here. So first surveil finds, what is it? Lightning Bolt. So Lightning Bolt, not a bad card in the matchup, not bad at all. But we are scared of Renin 6, so we want to put that to the bin and hope that this other bauble hits either creature or sorcery. And then this DRC survives no matter what. So that's kind of what we were praying for. We find a Croxa, which was like probably the best possible thing we could hit. First of all, we can cast it somewhat soon if we need to. And it's a creature, turns on Delirium. So we were super happy about that. So we pass, we see a Dwarven Mine on top, which is like not very good. And their turn was, I'm pretty sure it was just playing a Rin 6 out here. Yeah, they fetch Shock for Rin. So we're pretty happy with this board state. Yeah, just pretty good for us. We bobble them, see another land. So we know that they have a land in hand, 2 lands in hand, and a land on top. So they have potentially 4 spells, and we're feeling okay about this spot. We draw a land which we wanted, an expressive, which was very good. Drown, not so much, but I think we have another easy turn of DRC plus Inquisition here. So we Inquisition them, and, well, we're surveilling here. DRC, I don't think we want that. I think we just want lands at this point. We put an Inquisition onto the bottom for that specific reason. And then their hand was Anger and a Prismatic Ending and a Transmogrify and a Lightning Helix. So pretty easy take of Anger. It's definitely an awkward position though, right? Because they just have a bunch of removal spells and we really don't have that many threats. So it's going to be a tough game for us here. We have to attack Rin, I believe. We could attack them, but I think at some point we need to get this Rin off the table or just like prevent it from ultimating. So I take that line. Not 100% sure if that was correct. So this turn, you could Expressive Iteration, but we know they have Transmogrify plus Dwarven Mind, so again, another pretty easy turn. We're just going to try and attack this Rin. They'll kill it with Lightning Helix, and then here we are. Kind of just like at a standstill. Hopefully we draw a land next turn and just can be able to start progressing here. So I believe they end up going for it here off of a Scalding Tarn, so we know their entire hand here, which is pretty awesome. Yeah, they end up going for it, so we end up killing it with Drown and Lock. Pretty easy turn. And then we find a land, which is great. And then we have an Expressive Iteration, which hit Shadow, Land, and EE, which was fantastic. So we take the Shadow because I believe with 2 fetches, you want 2 Shadows, obviously. And EE we can just play out for 0, which is like what we had always played on. So, like, pretty good turn for us. Play this EE out on 0, play our lands, and we're passing it up. So, what did they end up doing here? They end up playing a Chalice on 1, which was kind of scary, so they must have just drawn that, I believe. Or maybe the turn prior. But they end up passing here, and I think what I would say is a mistake at this point. I don't end up popping this EE, and I think this is a mistake. I think what you want to do here is pop the EE and just play 2 4/4s and just start pressuring them. Although potentially just passing and playing Croxa here is also correct, which is what I end up doing. But I think what we end up drawing punishes us. We end up drawing another Shadow here. So I think the line we took was kind of weird, but kind of reasonable as well. But we know their hand's like mainly lands, so at least this Croxa is going to be a pretty fast clock. So they end up discarding a land, which is no shocker because they have a Rin in 6. So if they draw Transmogrify, we lose this turn, but I think this is a calculated risk. Like, what else are you going to do? Just pop EE on 0? Like, hold it up for a turn? No. So they end up passing, and so, like, we were of, like, the same thought before that they were on mainly lands, so we wanted to attack here and see what happens with this discard. So we end up attacking here, trigger Croxa. They end up discarding a land, which takes them down to 9. So I think the heads up play here, which we end up doing, is just pop this EE, get in our 6 now. And since they discarded a land, it might seem like they just have all lands, right? So that means this Croxa will win the game. So we end up going for this line, get them down to 3. We play our Croxa out, try and bolt them, and they have a Lightning Helix. So kind of like worst possible situation, but at this point I don't think they have any outs. Because the problem is, we know they have 2 lands. We know they have these 2 lands specifically in their hands still. Actually, I think we know they have an Arid Mesa and like another fetch land. At this point, I'm actually very confused what they can draw at this point, because even Transmogrify into Emrakul loses, right? Because they have, even if they don't have 2 lands, let's say they have a land and a spell here, we have 2 Croxa activations next turn, right? We have attack with Croxa, it gets killed by Emrakul, and then we can escape a Croxa. So we felt very good at this position that, like, we just can't lose the game. So we'll see what happens here, but we felt pretty confident about this position. They end up cycling a Triome and then conceding. So we take down the first match, and I will see you all in match number 2. All right, we're here for game 1 of match number 2. We're on the play again, which is pretty nice. We reveal our good old Lurrus companion, and we see a very good opening hand. So if this was on the draw, it almost like you could maybe consider mulliganing, but I don't even think you would consider then at all. But this hand's fantastic, so we just snap keep it. But I think we do make a mistake here. And I want to talk about this very briefly. I think I should have bobbled them. Let's say we see Bolt, Unholy Heat, Prismatic Ending. Just lead off with Inquisition. Maybe even hold the Inquisition. Just don't play out Ragavan. I make the mistake here of leading off with Ragavan, then bobbling. So I think this was a mistake. Our opponent leads off with a Mausoleum Wanderer, which is like, okay, whatever, great, fantastic for us. We ended up bobbling them, seeing a Shacklegeist. I still think we made a mistake here, but we got kind of rewarded. Their hands, or their top card was just a Shacklegeist. I would have led off with Ragavan regardless, but I think there was some consideration to what we just mentioned. So draw a land and Inquisition, so we just get to go double Inquisition this turn, and so we see double Shacklegeist, double Counterspell, and an Ebelgast Herald and 1 land. So you got to make this decision now. You either take both Counterspells and resolve everything, or take both creatures and fight that fight. And I believe that taking the Shacklegeists are better, because first of all, we already have something on the board. We're kind of pressuring them. We have a decent amount of discard spells, and we have a Lurrus, so we have stuff to be doing. They are kind of land light here, so like there's no even guarantee they'll get up to Nebelgast Herald. And with a handful of 0 removal spells, taking creatures just sound better. So I ended up taking both the Shacklegeist here. I think it's the correct decision. And then we're not going to attack here. So they end up just playing land go. So it's pretty much just like, wow, they have a counterspell, right? But then they attack with their Mausoleum Wanderer, and I'm like, okay, so that's kind of interesting. I thought maybe they have like a Rattle Chains, they're going to flash in and kill our Ragavan, but then we get to resolve something. So it felt like a very like naive, like just kind of dopey attack. So we're just going to start off our turn by attacking with Ragavan. And they have no blocks, so we just connect with Ragavan. We were hoping that this hit something. It hit a redirect. So I'm not the most familiar with rules, so I was a little bit scared to play out my Shadow because I don't know how this card would work with like a counter spell. I'm not 100% sure. So I think I made a mistake by not just going. So you'll see what happens here. I go Thoughtseize, take the Rattle Chains, which I thought they had, and leave them with the same hand. 2 counter spells and Nebelgast. That's just a kind of mediocre hand. I still don't even know how it works, but I should have probably just played Shadow here and tried to redirect, but I was a little afraid that I would look like a dope and not know what I was doing. So I just bought Lurrus here, because I actually don't know how that works, but yeah, we just buy Lurrus and we continue on. Draw a Supreme Phantom, which is kind of terrifying. We're very low here, so they attack smartly. Like, this blocks very well, so then we draw a land. So I think the obvious play here is definitely Lurrus. Lurrus for sure, and then figure out if you want to shock and play Death Shadow. But if you want to shock and play Death Shadow, you literally die to land or spirit. So I think that's the bad play. So I just end up playing Lurrus and bobbling and saying go. And we're definitely not in the best spot here, but we do have Dress Down to turn off flying, so we might be okay, is what like the thought process. And they're drawing Island, so we would have died if we shocked and played Shadow. So we just, they attack here, or they don't even attack. They just pass. Oh no, they do attack. My mistake. They do attack. And then we get to our upkeep here. And this is where we have an interesting decision. Alright, so they try flashing in the Nebelgast Herald, which we had to decide if we wanted to play Dress Down, and I think it's a pretty easy yes. Um, A, it stops the Nebelgast Herald from tapping, and all we have to do to not die this turn is draw a land. And we literally die if we don't find a land. Well, I guess we don't literally die, but we're going to die. We can't let them untap with 2 counterspells. Like, it's a very obvious yes play dress down, because they have counterspells. We can't do it on their turn to, like, try and, like, you know, oh, I got your creatures, they lose flying. Like, no, that's just not good. So if we draw a land, we get to go Shadow and then end step dress down again, and then just have Shadow, Ragavan, Lurrus on the battlefield against a bunch of creatures that don't do much because they won't have flying. So dress down, kind of like winning this game at this point for us. Without that, we would have literally been dead. So this was the small downside, I guess, is if we drew another dress down into a land. But the land we end up drawing is a shock land, so it doesn't end up mattering, realistically, because we would have died if we just didn't. So we just play dress down, go to the end step, wait for this dress down to leave the battlefield, and then play it again off of Lurrus, because we didn't play anything off Lurrus this turn. So, like, at this point, we should probably be winning this game, right? Slowly but surely, we're going to be okay. And then we draw another dress down, which is fantastic, considering we know they have counter spells. I think we might have wanted to attack here with Shadow. I'm not actually certain. But I think not attacking here was a mistake by me. So we're just waiting until our end step. Since we know they have double counter spell, we just want to dress down and then dress down out of our hand. So that's what we end up doing. They end up using one of their counter spells to try and just win the game here, which is fine. Then we just dress down again. And we find a Croxa. And I think I made a mistake here. I think I should have kept the DRC just because any lands are just bad. And I guess maybe it's not that bad. We kind of do want a removal spell at this point. Removal spell can allow us to start really attacking and winning this game. But we end up passing here. Again, we're in a fine spot. They can't attack. They just have a Mausoleum Wanderer, which is like whatever, and just a counter spell. So we're pretty good here. We're winning this game. We just get to start dress downing and just have that loop. We keep having to deploy a threat. Definitely made a mistake here, I feel like, although it's kind of hard to avoid this mistake, or it's like impossible to not do this, I feel like, because we need dress down, but I feel like we should have tried to figure out a way to not attack with this, but it's okay. And then disaster happens. I literally just misclick, forget to, I just press 1 in my end step instead of casting the dress down, and we lose the game because of another misclick. So 2 misclicks pretty fast, which felt bad because I think we were winning this game pretty handedly. But anyways, we're getting to game number 2. Sad. Alright, before we get into game number 2, we're talking about the sideboard. We ended up just cutting 4 of our discard spells and a Croxa for 2 EEs and Unholy Heat and 2 Terminates. I just think what you want to be doing in this matchup is like almost like a pseudo control deck. Just kill everything and hope that your little dirtily threats win you the game. So that was my game plan. Plus, I think discard spells aren't necessarily the best against spirits, although this is definitely a different spirits build. So maybe they were okay because they are playing counter spells. But I kind of erred on the side of just removal spells. So we'll see how it ended up going. So we're getting into match number 2. Let's see our opening hands. Our opening hand's definitely risky looking, right? But it has Ragavan. And if they don't have a 1-drop, we're just Expressive Iteration's just going to find us a land. We'll be okay. So I ended up keeping it. Definitely risky, but we'll see how it goes. Turn 1, they have no play, so we feel fantastic. We just instantly swing in with Ragavan. No thought about it. And then we play Expressive Iteration. Expressive Iteration finds land, so Scalding Tarn, Drown, and Bloodstained Mire. And this is where another misclick happens. You can make 2 options here. 1, keep dress down not dress down. Drown lock in your hand, exile a land, put a land at the bottom. Which I definitely think that's okay. I personally wanted to go land in hand, drown and lock to the bottom, land and exile. I just want to hit my land drops, progress the game, win the game like that. But I accidentally click Sculling Tarn to hand, Bloodstained Mire to the bottom, and Drown and Lock in exile. So literally the worst possible for us, and that's another misclick. Like, it wasn't even like I thought about doing that. I just misclicked, and it was just kind of upsetting. But they end up just playing a Supreme Phantom, so it's not the end of the world. We just have a Terminate here, so we'll be okay. We draw a Bauble, which is a Polluted Delta on top. I think we should bottom this, or not bottom it, but bin it. But we end up keeping it on top because I was like, oh, I just want lands, right? I mean, I think that's a fine assumption off the iteration, although now I think we don't need lands. Although we do want our third land, I think keeping this on top is a mistake. So we just terminate, we get in there, we just try and get the pressure on. So, but I do think that's a mistake. So their turn, they just pass with 3 mana up. We're assuming this has to be a Nebelgast Herald. So I was a little concerned here about it, and I was thinking about potentially Dress Downing to prevent this, but then that doesn't really accomplish that much. So we end up drawing a Bolt, which is like the best possible, because now our Ragavan gets to get in. So we end up just making another level 1 play, just killing the creature, getting in, keeping an Unholy Heat on top. We're fine with that. Attacking. We get a Rattle Chains, which I think we were supposed to play because, like, why not? It's just another flyer, it's another beater. So we just play it and pass. Then they just pass the turn yet again, I believe. And we're definitely concerned here, right? They have another Nebelgast Herald, it seems like, which they do. We kept the Unholy Heat on top, so we're like fine with this. So we just let that resolve. Unholy Heat get in there. We keep a Bauble. No, we bend the Bauble. But we get in there, don't exile a spell, and like we're super far ahead here. We have a Drown the Lock for another Herald if they have it. But then they do throw us a little curveball here. They play a card that I've never seen in my life. Dungeon Geist. Pretty much just keeps a creature tapped down for as long as it's on the battlefield. So I think we were just supposed to dress down here. Like, we can... Funnily enough, if we draw a land, we can end up EEing for 4 here and popping it. So I believe we're supposed to just dress down here. So almost any spell wins us the game. A land wins us the game. We surveil a Bolt on top, which is perfect. So we just draw the bolt it, get in there. We have 7 point on the board. They concede. And yeah. So we're into into game number 3. So... Alrighty, back here for game number 3. And we're going to look at our hand here. So, hand, it's a snapper. 2 kill spells, Ragavan, Bauble, like, Dress Down. These are fine things. Nothing bad about this hand, realistically. No turn 1 play is fantastic for us. DRC is a little weird. I kind of wanted to lead off on it, but Ragavan, it's just too big of an upside. Just like... This card's just so good. So we just play it. And yeah, we pass the turn. They play a Supreme Phantom, which was perfect for us. We just bolt it. Or I guess we lead off with Channeler and then bolt it. But I do think we make a mistake this turn, which is with the DRC. And we keep a land on top. I don't think we need a land. We have Ragavan. I think this is a mistake I made, like... a reoccurring mistake I made throughout the league. I don't think you need lands very often with Ragavan. And especially in a matchup like this where I feel like Lurrus is not that important. So I think I made a mistake here. But keeping the land could also be reasonable. So we end up keeping it. We surveil it to the top again. And we just get in there with Ragavan. So we see a Rattle Chains. And I'm actually kind of curious if we were supposed to just bolt the Supreme Phantom, get in there with Ragavan, and see if we find something that we want to play off of their deck. But I'm not actually sure about that, so I'm kind of curious what you all think. So then we just, pass the turn. They have 3 mana up here. We're like, okay, they have a Nebelgast Herald. We've seen this song and dance before. We'll just bolt it. We go to our upkeep, and they have nothing. And I'm just like, okay, I guess they might just have a counterspell, right? We play this DRC out, nothing. I'm like, all right, maybe they have a flash threat. Maybe they have a rattle chain. So I'll just attack and then bolt the rattle chains, right? We attack with both. They let it happen. We exile the counterspell from the top of their deck, and yeah, they do nothing. They just pass. So I don't even know what just happened there. So I was just like super confused. I just wanted to hold up my mana, although buying Lurrus might have been reasonable. But I was just like afraid at this point of something. So then they just play land, I believe. And they just pass the turn yet again. So I think at this point, there's definitely some merit to just dress downing on the end step here, just to turn on Delirium here. I end up not doing it. I think that's a mistake again. I think we should have dressed downed. It's definitely one of those things that the more you play this deck, the more you get, accustomed to it, and like you're fine doing like certain things. I was uncomfortable doing it, so I just didn't. I think that was definitely a mistake though. We end up drawing another land, which is not fantastic. We thought they would have a Nebelgast Herald this turn. They didn't either, so we just, again, tack. Exile, counterspell. And here we are, just doing our thing. We're buying Lurrus, passing the turn, just confused out of our minds. And then gets to their turn. They end up playing a Mausoleum Wanderer. I'm like, all right, guess we'll just drown and lock this at the end step here. I actually do it in the main phase because I forgot. I was a little bit afraid of a rattle chains, so I wanted to dress down in response to this drown if they played out a rattle chains. And I didn't want to stick around to our turn, so that was the main reason I did in the main phase. So that was the main reason. So we'd try and drown and lock it, and then something strange happens. They play Essence Flux, which I've never seen before. It is literally just an ephemerate, but gives a +1/+1 for spirits. Sure. I was like, all right, whatever. That's fine. I mean, we have a bolt. We can still deal with this creature if we really want to. We get Delirium, which is fantastic. Then we made another misclick, which is kind of just like the ongoing theme of this league. We floated 3 mana here. We're going to play this Lurrus. We're about to click on it. I accidentally click on the Croxa, which is fine. It's really not that big of a deal. I was just kind of scared of Counterspell, and I think I should have let off with Lurrus, but if they ever counter this, they just die. So I think it was fine. Honestly, leading off with Croxa might have been better anyways, especially when they discard this land, because now when we play this Lurrus, if they actually counter it, they do die. So we just play Lurrus, play Bobble. We see if they counter it. They don't. I was just like genuinely confused. Like, we just attack here, offer the trade with Ragavan, and kill them with Bolt if they don't. And they take the trade, so I was like, okay, they're at 2, and then we'll just sit here and they're dead eventually. So we ended up winning this game. It was just super weird. I don't even know how to describe this game, so yeah. But anyways, we're getting into match number 3. So that was match number 2. Yeah. All right, we're back here for match number 3. We're on the draw, and we're going to look at our hand here. So definitely a weird looking hand. I think it's fine. I ended up keeping it. There's no threats in it, which is definitely the problem. I should probably be mulliganing to threats more often, but I ended up keeping it and just accepting the fact that they have a Ragavan, we lose. They didn't show us Lurrus, so I was like a little bit less inclined to believe that that's what they had. So, yeah, we'll see what happens here. They go with Fetch Shock for Steam Vents, and I was like, okay, this game's over. Thought they were going to have a Ragavan, they had DRC, and I'm okay. So, they continue on. Bobble, and they put a Street Wraith to the bin. So instantly, alarm bells are going off. Dress down's probably not that great here. They probably are playing Shadow. We just got to think about that in the future. So that's the main thing we got to be concerned about. Iteration's always a decent draw, so we'll Inquisition them. Their hand was DRC, 2 lands, and a Street Wraith. So pretty happy about this board state. We can just end up killing this DRC next turn, and we'll be okay. So they Thoughtseize us, and they take our drown. I'm like, okay, well, it's kind of shitty. And then we end up drawing a DRC. I think there should have been more consideration to just dress downing on their turn this turn. Like this turn, instead of playing this DRC, just being more mana efficient. But I end up taking a little bit more of a risky line here and just playing it out. But maybe saving some damage would have been correct. I'm not sure. They find a removal spell, which punishes us for it. But again, we kind of have to just live with it. They get in there with DRC and they play a shadow. So the stress down looks horrible. And then we expressive iteration here. So I think I might have made a mistake here. Not on the cards we took, because it was a 2-drop Dust Shadow Bolt, and I think it's fine taking Shadow and Bolt here. But I think I should have swapped this. I think I should have played out the Shadow here and kept the Bolt in hands. So we could have fetched Shock down to 8, played this as a 5/5, blocked Shadow, and due to, you know, state-based actions, whatever it's called, the Shadow would have survived as a 8/8 and with 2 damage on it, and we would have actually probably been okay here. Instead, I decided to exile the Bolt and then fetch Shock to bolt the DRC. I think this was a mistake though, because now we're just dead to Bolt and land, or fetch or Shock land. So I think this was a mistake. They end up not having the Shock land, so I was like, okay, we're gonna be fine. We have 2 11/11s. We're gonna be winning this game, and then they just end up Kolaghan's commanding me. So I think I made a mistake, not playing Shadow out. But yeah, you learn from your mistakes. So we're getting into game 2 here. All right, before we get into game 2, we're going to talk about the sideboard plan again. I take out all the dress downs because I think against a fellow Shadow deck, it's bad. So, I mean, I think that's pretty obvious. I took out 3 Inquisitions, that's all of them, for Terminates and EEs. And I also brought in the Unholy Heat and Unearth, because I think Unearth's a little grindy. Although it might have been bad because they might be bringing in Graveyard Hate, which I didn't think about. But I think I should have also brought in these Soul God Lanterns, which I did do for game 3. But we'll see how game 2 goes here. Lurrus, we have a very fine hand. Nothing fantastic, but just okay. We just play out this DRC here and pass the turn. They have their own DRC, so I think so as they're passing the turn, I think it's pretty easy. We're just going to bolt Thoughtseize here, or you could even go Thoughtseize Shadow, but I just kind of want to get their creature off the battlefield. And then we draw good old Ragavan. Ragavan always making things more difficult, so we end up deciding to Thoughtseize here. We see a hand of Terminate and 5 lands, or 4 lands. So we're like, all right, well, we'll just play this Ragavan out here, offer the trade with the DRC here, because I think that's fine. Like, our hand's much higher of quality. Maybe this is a mistake. Maybe we should have just passed the turn here, but I think denying them any, like, value with this DRC is fine. So we pass the turn. They end up drawing a Terminate here, killing our Ragavan, so we get slightly punished, but we had to run out the Shadow and hold up Bolt and drown the lock, so we felt pretty decent about this position. So we passed to them. Let's see what they do here. Play Expressive Iteration, which those were 2 pretty good draws off the top for them, so we felt kind of shitty about that. But they end up playing a 1/1 Shadow, which we get to Bolt here. And then we end up drawing a Ragavan, which is a freaking fantastic draw. So we end up dashing it, and we hit a DRC off of it, and we just cast it. Pretty easy decision here. So they play a DRC, Thoughtseize us, and I think they end up taking the Ragavan here, which I don't know if that was the correct take. I feel like I would have taken the Drown the Lock. Because we just get to end up killing this DRC and getting in there, but it tends to make a little bit more sense once this happens. So we try to drown the DRC, and then they end up just Unholy Heating our DRC, which felt a little weird. I felt like they should have done that beforehand, but, you know, to each their own. So we just kill it, we get in there with our Shadow, we're trying to find a land here. And like now you can really you can just really see the power of having Lurrus. If they had Lurrus, they would have been like so far ahead here, but they're not. So really, they lost this game because they don't have Lurrus. I think if you guys are ever considering not playing Lurrus, this is a very good example of why Lurrus is just everywhere. This turn was pretty easy, I think. It was just DRC, and I made a mistake. I shouldn't have bobbled first. I should have just played DRC and unearthed the other DRC and then done it. But again, I felt so far ahead that it didn't matter, and it ended up not mattering here. They just conceded on our upkeep, so. All right, we're getting into game number 3. So we're getting to game 3, and as I said, I ended up bringing in the Soulguide Lanterns for Terminate and Croxa, which the main reason I got rid of the Croxa is I felt like we could already win a long game and we don't need Croxa for that just because of Lurrus. So I definitely think that might be a mistake, but just like based on how I felt like we were good enough to just like not need it. I guess it could have been wrong. It might have been wrong, but I thought it was okay. And now we're looking at definitely a weird looking hand here. I decided to keep it because of 2 reasons. One, we have plenty of threats here. We're on the draw, so like we're more likely to find a land, and we have an answer to an early creature with Lightning Bolt. So I ended up keeping it. Definitely a risky hand. We needed to find lands, but I felt pretty confident. And they don't even play anything here. We end up drawing an EE, and I think we make a mistake. I don't think we should play a Channeler out here. Like, why are they shocking and playing a Bobble? There's like no reason to do that. Other than a removal spell, right? Maybe a Thought Scour, but I highly doubt they're playing Thought Scour. So we end up running out of Channeler and it just dies to Unholy Heat, but I think this might be a mistake. Maybe just holding is better. They have another land, which is fine, into an iteration, which I was like, okay, you can have an anticipate, whatever. But they got kind of lucky here and hit a Bobble, which feels shitty, but, you know, whatever. Bad plays get rewarded. Bad keeps sometimes also get rewarded. Find a land, which was fantastic. So we just end up going Channeler Go, which I think is a pretty easy play. We could have like considered unearthing here, which I think would have been an interesting play. But with EE in the hand, I don't feel confident doing that. So they fetch Shock and end up Inquisitioning us and take the Expressive, which I think is probably the best pick, if I would just say so myself. So now we're just like, I didn't end up fetching here because I'm fine drawing the land. I don't want to thin my deck. Definitely something small, but definitely what I ended up doing. So they bobble us again. We draw a land. We just end up fetch shocking, and buying Lurrus here. We're kind of afraid of Ragavan, but that's about it. So nothing they can deploy here that's too terrifying. So they end up cycling Street Wraith, which is like whatever. They play a DRC, which I'm like, I have plenty of answers to, so I felt fine with this. Then we draw lands. And now we had a good think here. Like you could go EE on 1, you could go Lurrus DRC, you could go Bolt, Shadow. But I think going EE was the best move because like almost all of the other plays involve getting a 1-mana permanent on the battlefield and it'll just die to EE. So I end up going with EE here on 1 and playing this land untapped, which might have been a mistake, but they already burned 2 bolts, and I think you want to just not get burned out here. So I was like, whatever, I'll be fine. We have a Shadow in hand. I want to be able to play it next turn. So then they attack, and we don't pop it yet because we kind of want to waste their turn. We also do want to get low for Shadow. So there were like 2 pretty good reasons to let this hit us. We kind of want to time walk them with this if we can. So we pop it on the instep, hold up our bolt for whatever reason. Draw Ragavan, which is a pretty good draw. So like you could consider playing Lurrus, but I just wanted to dash the Ragavan here, see what happens. I believe they end up killing it. Yes. And then we just play Shadow, We could have like unearthed, but again, these decks, maybe not with Lurrus, but they do tend to have like engineered explosives in their sideboard, so I was kind of concerned about like running out multiple 1-drops here. And then let's see what happens next. They just draw a land, which is fine. They end up fetch shocking, which was kind of confusing. They play a channeler, a shadow, and we did see Stubborn Denial game 1, and I actually was very much contemplating this. Game 1, they milled over it, and I was trying to ask myself if either A, they had a bolt in hand to bolt themselves to save their shadow, or B, had a Stubborn Denial. And I think either way I was fine because we have Lurrus. So I ended up going for the bolt here. And they did have the Stubborn Denial, which didn't feel great, but you know, it is what it is. I think it's fine considering like how our board is looking. So we play Lurrus because we have Unearth, we're feeling fantastic. Play the DRC, we're fine trading away the board here because we're very far ahead with a Lurrus and an Unearth. So they do just go straight to combat, I believe. And considering they still have 2 bolts, okay, they're at terminate. They terminate for Lurrus here, which is fine. So considering they still have 2 bolts left in the deck, I wanted to block here to just not die to like running bolts. Plus, we have Unearth for Lurrus, so I feel pretty fantastic about this. And then we end up drawing Thoughtseize, which is a good draw. Builds our shadow up and clears the way. They ended up having a Drown Lock, which kind of was like shitty, but you know, we can just unearth Lurrus, and then like we're not losing this game. The writing's on the wall at this point. They even draw a Terminate for a Lurrus, but that's fine. We draw an Unholy Heat, put them to 1, and the game is over, all but over. Shadows on top. Like, there's nothing they can do. Only thing at this point that could win the game is an EE, and we still have a Death Shadow on top. So we end up winning match number 3. So we're about to get into match number 4. All right, we're back here for match number 4 and game 1. So let's see what our starting hand was looking like. Definitely another one of those risky starting hands, especially against a Lurrus deck. I do like these hands a lot, though. Ooh, sorry. But wasn't actually certain if we wanted to keep this hand. But with Bobble, Thoughtseize, and Drown the Lock, I tend to like this. So I end up keeping it. We got punished earlier by trying to keep one of these hands, but again, it kind of happens. So, you know, we'll see how it goes. We draw another Thoughtseize, which is not the best draw in the world. So we Bobble them, and we see a Harden Scales, which is like blast from the past, right? We haven't seen this deck in freaking forever. So, I mean, pretty easy play here. We're just going to fetch Shock Thoughtseize here and see what's up. So, we saw a hand of 3 lands, Arcbound Ravager, and Harden Scales. I mean, Harden Scales is on top. I think it was an easy take of Hangerback Walker, just because I'm not terribly concerned with Arcbound Ravager being the only threat on the battlefield. Like, it's just kind of hard to beat all the 1/1s out of this, so I think it was the easy take there. So then we just let them go. They fetch Shock for a Temple Guard, which I thought they were going to go Arcbound Ravager, Harden Scales, but they just didn't play the Arcbound Ravager. So I was like, okay, whatever. And drawing another discard spell was good, because now we have Lurrus Insurance as well. So we pass the turn, or they pass the turn. We just draw Thoughtseize, or we play our Inquisition, and just take their Arcbound Ravager past the turn. I think we made a mistake, though. Should have played Steam Vents here, and I was kicking myself later on for this, because I really wanted to go expressive and guarantee that we could Thoughtseize them, but it was kind of like I don't know, it's kind of risky to like make that play the next turn, right? Because Lurrus is just that big of a problem. They just buy Lurrus and pass, so got kind of punished here. We drew another Thoughtseize, which was fine, but not great. We ended up just going Croxa first before Inquisitioning, or before Dot Seizing, because we wanted to see what they discard. Let's see. Yeah, and they discarded a Hangerback Walker, which was pretty fantastic for us. Like a free discard spell and like giving them less information was just fantastic, right? Because now they're thinking maybe we have like, who knows, Shadow or something, but doing it this way gives them less information. Take their Lurrus, now they just have a land in hand, and like we're pretty much at this point we're pretty much in garbage time, right? They just have Zabaz, which is kind of good, kind of scary, but we have Drown in the Lock. Dress Down seems insane here. Play this expressive. We find land, bolt, expressive. I end up taking bolt because I want another removal spell just in case. So we take bolt, exile the steam vents, pass the turn. They did draw pretty well here, but like our board state at this point is just kind of insane. So they drew Zabaz, and then they end up drawing, I think it's the life-linking modular creature, yes, Arcbound Mauser. So we just say go, end step. We are flashing in this Dress Down and then just killing their board, not allowing them to modular, which that was a pretty sweet interaction that I kind of found out the first game by playing here. So we just Dress Down, turn off all their modular and infect, draw a Shadow, which is perfect, kill their board, and draw another Bolt's fantastic. I was kind of confused on what I should have done, Bolt or Drown here, and I think I was supposed to Drown this turn, because then that means the following turn I can buy Lurrus and hold up Bolt, but we ended up drowning here, or we ended up bolting here, because I think Drown is just a better card, but I think that was a misevaluation of mana. But then they just attack here, which we're not terribly scared of. Draw another Shadow, so we don't really get that punished. And then I think they just concede here once we play this other Shadow. Yeah, they ended up conceding. So pretty easy game one there. Like, we just kind of drew pretty well. We're getting into game number 2. All right, before we get into game number 2, we're going to look at the sideboard here. We ended up taking out Ragavan, 4 discard spells, 2 Croxas, and brought in EE, Unholy Heat, Alpine Moon, Dress Down, and Terminate. Or 1 Terminate. I believe, so like, we didn't see anything game 1 except for, what is it, Inkmoth Nexus, but I think that's good enough to bring in Alpine Moon, because that card's just such a big problem sometimes. So I believe that was the right decision. And then we're looking at this hand. This hand's very good. EE's fantastic. Multiple removal spells. We felt pretty confident with this hand. EE with Lurrus loops is just kind of nuts. So we just end up like taking this snap. We don't have a threat, but whatever. They even end up playing an Uzalith, which felt great. I did have some consideration of whether we're supposed to play Channeler here, but considering they have a 1 drop out, I kind of just want to play EE on 1. So then they play Urza Saga, and I'm like, shit, okay, I might have made a mistake here, but we'll be fine. We'll be able to loop this with Lurrus at some point. And then they, like, shatter our hearts with the Pithy Needle, so that felt very bad. But, you know, it is what it is. So we just play a Channeler here, not much else we can do. And then they're going to just start getting the value. Then they tap here to get rid of our DRC, and I'm like, okay, they just must not have another land then, right? They have another land, and we're like, well, we're kind of in trouble here. And they had a Walking Ballista, which felt pretty brutal, because we can't really even play this DRC out first, because the problem is they get to shoot it. So we had the Unholy Heat first. So we were definitely in like a shitty situation this game. But we have our DRC down finally, and we're trying to start making like forward progress. They just make a construct, which is like, again, whatever. Who cares? We were more afraid of what they're finding here. They find a relic, which is kind of shitty for us. You're good. And they just, you know, exile something, which is like, whatever. So, I mean, we're probably just going to end up losing to this land. Which is kind of shitty. But again, we have a bunch of removal spells. So we bolt first because, you know, obvious reasons. We want the modular to happen. I guess it doesn't really matter since we're killing both. Yeah. I just realized now we made a mistake, which is kind of funny. We should definitely not have let the modular trigger happen. No, not yet.
Order it.
I need to order it. I just realized now that we made a mistake. Yeah. By letting the +1/+1 counter get on there, we give them another trigger off of the Uzalith, which is funny now that I'm just seeing that, and it's definitely a mistake I didn't realize. I didn't even realize during the game. Like, typically I get mad at myself for missing something like that, but I didn't even realize that. But here we are. It's going to be hard to beat this welding jar, but I think we ended up drawing something pretty good here, which was a Death Shadow. So we buy Lurrus and play our Shadow, which I think is a fine play. And then they draw one of the better cards in the deck. I'm not sure if we could have beat it anyways, but they end up drawing Arcbound Worker or Ravager, and that's just lethal with the Uzalith here. With modular and everything, we're just dead. So it was definitely a rough game here, but you know, we kind of got by the Pithy Needle, but it was a close game. So we're on to game number 3. Well, we'll see. We'll watch our demise here, but yeah, we die here. So game 3. Right, we're here for game number 3. We're on the play, and our hand is looking pretty meh. Not gonna lie, pretty meh. I think this is a mulligan, and I definitely did not do it in the game. But hindsight, probably should have mulliganed this hand. Yeah, I don't know why I kept this. It was just kind of a bad keep. Fetch Shock, play Channeler, Bobble. We see I don't even remember what we see on top. I believe it was a Ragavan or a removal spell. We bobble them. We see a Relic, which is kind of scary against DRC, but, you know, it is what it is. So next turn, what was it? What did we keep on top? It was an Unholy Heat. So we bobble again, or we fetch Shock here. Bobble. Find a Thoughtseize, which we really don't want at this point. I think we'd rather just threats or some way to get onto the board, which I think that's what we're looking for. Or even removal spells or an engineered explosives. Just something. So we connect in for 1. Woo woo. We draw an Alpine Moon, which was like probably the best draw. And I was like, okay, they're going to slam an Urza Saga. We're going to get them. It's going to be fantastic. We're going to be winning this game. But they just don't do anything here. They just play a Pithy Needle, and that was it. Yeah, I always thought this was pretty funny at the time. After they Pithy Needled our EE, then and only then we draw it, and I just had a little chuckle. But our hand looks pretty good here. So I decided to not buy Lurrus here, I believe. I think we just played Shadow out. I might be wrong. Let's see what I ended up doing. No, I bought Lurrus. Okay. I remember considering buying Lurrus, or playing Shadow rather than buying Lurrus, and I actually don't know which one's right. But they still don't hit a land drop, so kind of just like a non-game from the opponents. I think I made a mistake here earlier in this game, or maybe it wasn't, but this EE's dead anyways, so I might as well get a surveil value out of it, which I don't know why I didn't do it there. I ended up doing it, I believe, the next turn, but at the time, I didn't even think about that. Just playing it on 0 just kind of makes sense, right? I think we do it this turn, and we actually get super fortunate here. I remember, because I was like, you know what, I'll play out this EE for 0 post-combat. Like, this is when I realized it. I was like, oh, why don't I just play out this EE? And then we got super lucky, and we hit a Mishra's Bobble off of the Surveil, and I was like, well, sometimes it's meant to be. And we find an Expressive on top, which was fantastic. So, they finally find an Arid Mesa. They might be in it. I wasn't very certain that they were, but they play what? Hangerback. We just try and kill it here. Just to, you know, get rid of it. They're gonna welding jar it, like whatever. It's tapped. It's okay. Keep the expressive on top, and like we're pretty good here. They just missed the land drop for way too long, and we just end up rolling them over here. We expressive into what? I think it's a shadow. Get some lands. We get to swing in with everything. Play out the shadow. Like we're just so far ahead. We just have like just too many resources, and we just get in there and they're just dead next turn. So they ended up conceding, but writing was definitely on the wall there. So we were 4-0. 4-0. Let's see if we can get the 5-0. All right, we're here for match number 5. See if we can get the 5-0. All right, so definitely an interesting hand. If this was any other card than Ragavan, it's probably mulligan, but Ragavan is insane. So we keep. I just feel like that's all I gotta say. And we lead on Ragavan. Like pretty simple play here. Nothing too crazy. See what they do. They lead off with Godless Shrine, which I was like, so what deck leads off on Godless Shrine? And then they Grief Undying us, which makes this Ragavan look very bad. And they just take the Bolt and I believe the Croxa, which I was a little confused on the Croxa take. Because if you're worried about discarding, I feel like Thoughtseize and Inquisition just worse. But again, at the time, I was like, all right, whatever. Then we just draw DRC, which was probably the best possible. And then we just pass the turn here. They just played land, did absolutely nothing, which made me feel very good. I was definitely concerned about, what was it? Stoneforge Mystic. So we just Thoughtseize here because we want to be able to play the Shadow as a 1/1. We get rewarded here by, oh yeah, we fetch first because of the Surveil, obviously it makes sense. We Thoughtseize here, we get super rewarded by Thoughtseizing. We keep a Bolt on top to get a Ragavan through, and we find a Grief. So we're looking good here. We have our 1/1, we're going to kill this Grief, play our Shadow out, like looking like a pretty good like beginning of the game. Then they draw Dothy, which kind of spooky, but it's fine. We draw the Bolt. I guess there was some consideration to bolting Dothy, but I just decided to bolt Grief and just try and kill them. And there's a land on top, and I just spin that. We don't need it. We swing with everything. Dothy can't block, so we're fine. They fetch for whatever planes. Their hand's literally empty. Doesn't matter. They play their land. They Thoughtseize, putting them to 6, and then they just concede. Like, they were just dead. I mean, they could have sacked the Dothy to bolt our DRC and, like, maybe stay alive, but they're pretty much dead at that point. So that was a very weird play to me. But, yeah. Anyways, we're into match, or game number 2, and we're 1 game away, potentially, from a 5-0. So, let's hope. All right, before we get into match, or game number 2, geez, I can't speak. We'll see what we sided. So we took out all the dress downs, which I thought were just a little slow here. I took out 3 discard spells, and I brought in Terminates, Unholy Heat, and Soul Guide Lantern. So Terminate was just for, I don't know, I was just concerned that they were going to play some creatures that we need to worry about, and like that's kind of why I brought in Unholy Heat as well. And then Soul Guide Lantern is, I tend to believe that these decks are Reanimator decks, or at least can be. And I just wanted to hedge against that just in case, because like the bare minimum, the card's just cycling, like whatever, it's fine. I don't know if that was necessarily correct, but in my head, I thought that was fine. Because like at the bare minimum, it's just like, it's like an opt almost, but a little bit worse. So that's what I ended up doing. And then we see our opening hand, and it's just like, it's just the typical, we see your Ragavan, we keep type of hand. So we end up keeping this hand, and it's just, yeah, it's a hand. So then they have a Thoughtseize. They take, this was a very bizarre take. They took our Soul Guide Lantern. So then that made me think that they are a Reanimator deck, and like why else? Why the hell are you taking Soul Guide Lantern? Doesn't make any sense. So we get into our turn. We draw a land, which is fantastic, and we just do what we do. What we do. We play Ragavan. Whatever. Like it's the best thing we can be doing. They play Overgrown Tomb. I'm just like super confused what's going on. And then they Prismatic Ending for 2. And I was just like super confused. So, I mean, we just make the pretty simple play of DRC plus Soul Guide Lantern because, like, why not? Like, if they're taking Soul Guide Lantern, obviously it's going to be good. So I think we got rewarded. We put a land to the bin. And, like, I guess it's just Reanimator and we got kind of lucky. Like, yeah. Then they give us the jukes a few times. They end up playing Collective Brutality, which is, like, okay. And then we just draw Expressive into, like, a Bolt, Thoughtseize. I took the Bolt because I was a little bit afraid of like potentially them having like 2 Stoneforge Mystics in hand, and I didn't want to lose to Stoneforge Mystic, and I think that's better than Bobble at this point, so that was specifically why I did that. So we Thoughtseize them, and it was, as we were somewhat concerned about, was Stoneforge Mystic, and their hand's just very shitty from this situation. So we felt, at this point, I felt like the game was pretty much over. Felt pretty excited that we were going to get the 5-0 at this point. I mean, here we just take Mountain in iteration. I think it's pretty easy. And then we just Croxa here. But you never know. They discard Unburial Rites, and I was like, oh shit. So we knew the Soul Guide Lantern was going to be good. We just had the foresight. So see what they do here. They just play lands. They're working on their way up to Unburial Rites. So as long as you don't mess up here and misclick again, if we don't misclick again, we should be okay, right? That's what I was thinking. We got a Ragavan, we Bobble, and I actually end up, I see Marsh Flats on top, and I actually don't want them to draw the Marsh Flats. So I end up just dashing the Ragavan, because I don't want them drawing it for grief. But then I believe they end up drawing it anyways. Might be mistaken. Let's see what they do. Yeah, they end up drawing the land anyways. And they play their grief. And I was like contemplating just like letting it resolve, but like why? Like I should just drown and lock it. It's just, that's the card they're gonna take. That's our best card in hand other than Ragavan. And like any other way we're getting 2 for 1. So just drowned it. And then they conceded. And that's when we got the 5-0. So that was pretty awesome. Talk about the deck. I'm going to say that this league was a little bit of a skew. Our opponents might have not been the best. Their decks might not have been the best selection. Didn't feel like the deck like was amazing. I definitely misclicked a few times, which happens. I'm not going to say like I don't want to say those were even punts. They weren't mistakes. There were definitely a few mistakes. But there are definitely a lot of misclicks as well, which is something that you can't really prevent on online. So, but about the deck, although Unearth came in kind of clutch in like 2 games, I don't think the card's good. I think you want to be cutting that. I think I might consider cutting Dress Down out of this deck, or at least just making the sideboard option. Like cut the Unearth and the the Unholy Heat for maybe 3 Dress Down in the side. I'm not sure. I feel like this can just be a Grixis deck at this point. Ragavan and DRC have just like continued to just be like the best possible thing you can be doing. These 2 cards are just like game breaking almost. Like they just feel so unfair. Like it's kind of insane. I think if you're playing Shadow at this point, you need to be playing these cards. I don't think there is any deck that can reason with not playing Ragavan. I don't think Jund can reason with it. Just red black, Grixis, 4 color. You need to be playing 4 of each. The cards are just so good. Like, if you want to be playing Jund, sure, play Jund. It's fine. You can slam your Goyfs in there, but also slam 4 Ragavans. I think the same thing goes for Grixis. I think the card is just, it's just, it just does too much. The card should be banned. Like, I feel like the card is just doing too much for too efficiently, and just like it's never a bad card. Sideboard wise, maybe add a Soul Guide Lantern, maybe add a Flusterstorm, maybe cut the Terminates. I think Murktide's on the little bit of a DL down low. It's getting a little bit away. Maybe you can cut it. Not actually certain. And then, I mean, main deck felt fantastic. So, honestly, deck felt pretty good all around. I mean, I think you can cut Dress Down out of the deck if you really want to. It's more fun with Dress Down, let's be honest. Won us a few games. It's good against Elementals. But yeah. Anyways, that's going to do it for me. Again, if you guys made it this far, thank you very much for watching. You guys are awesome. And if you're at this point, hit a like, comment, subscribe. Tell me what you would change about the deck. I'm kind of curious. Or if you even think Ragavan should be banned, I'm kind of curious about that. Maybe I'm on my own little island here and think that. Maybe I'm not. I don't think I am, but who knows? Maybe you guys think DRC should be banned. Could see that. Maybe Bobble. I don't really think Bobble should be. Who knows? Who knows? Maybe Lurrus should be. Diversity. It's always fun. So, anyways, I will see you all. Thanks for watching, and have a good day.